Welcome to The Explainer, where we take today's chaotic global headlines and show you exactly how they're all connected. If you've been following the news for May 8, 2026, you know it feels like a dozen different crises are all unfolding at the exact same time. But what if I told you they aren't isolated events at all? Today, we're mapping the dominoes.
So let's just dive right into this bizarre connection by looking at the incredible ripple effects of today's geopolitical events. I mean, it literally sounds like the setup to a joke, doesn't it? A warship fires in one hemisphere and a grocery store runs out of snacks in another. But this is the reality of our hyper-connected modern world. And by the end of this explainer, you are going to see exactly how those dots connect.
Here's our roadmap for making sense of the chaos today. We're going to track the Central Middle East conflict outward, looking at the economic shockwaves, global security and diplomacy, health and humanitarian crises, and finish up with some major U.S. domestic clashes.
All right, Part 1. The Middle East conflict resurges, and this fragile ceasefire gets seriously tested.
We're starting right at the epicenter. Now, for the past month, a really delicate ceasefire has managed to hold in the Middle East. But wow, look at how rapidly that's deteriorating. Just in the last few days, we've seen Iranian attacks on U.S. Navy destroyers right in the crucial Strait of Hormuz. And then today, May 8th, things escalated fast. The U.S. launched retaliatory strikes against Iranian military sites, and simultaneously, for the very first time since the ceasefire began, Israel conducted a strike on Beirut. This is absolutely critical because that strike reportedly took out a senior commander of Hezbollah's elite Radwan force, a highly specialized unit, so that throws a massive new variable into an already combustible situation.
And the rhetoric we're hearing is totally matching the military action. Right after the strike in Beirut, Prime Minister Netanyahu stated plainly that there is no immunity for Israel's enemies. Meanwhile, over in Washington, the messaging is navigating a really fine line. President Trump maintains that the broader ceasefire remains intact, which is fascinating, despite the fact that the U.S. and Iran are actively exchanging fire in the Gulf.
Section 2. Global Economic Shockwaves. Let's look at the real cost of this conflict. So how quickly does military action and a key choke point hit your wallet? Well, the answer is exactly $104.18. Because of the sheer uncertainty surrounding that U.S.-Iran ceasefire in the Persian Gulf, Brent crude oil just climbed nearly 3%, pushing it over $104 a barrel. And why does Brent crude matter to us? Because it's the global benchmark. When that number goes up, the cost of manufacturing, shipping, and literally fueling your car goes up almost instantly. The market is just reacting in real time to the instability.
And this brilliantly illustrates the supply chain ripple effect in action. First, you have regional panic prompting the UAE to act almost like covert operatives. They're secretly moving crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz with their tanker location trackers completely switched off just to bypass Iranian threats. Second, that kind of opacity naturally leads to massive supply fears, causing those global oil price spikes we just talked about. And third, that lands right on the domestic policy desk. It actually triggered President Trump to propose an indefinite suspension of the U.S. federal gas tax just to offset soaring energy costs for consumers pending congressional approval.
Okay, here is the answer to that wild question we asked at the very beginning of the explainer. It all comes down to interconnectedness. A naval conflict in the Middle East has completely disrupted the supply of critical chemical components that flow out of that region. And without those specific components, Japanese snack manufacturers are suddenly dealing with a severe shortage of packaging ink. Let's really absorb that pipeline for a second. A warship fires in the Strait of Hormuz, and a snack maker in Tokyo literally has to halt their assembly line. Unbelievable, right?
Moving on to Section 3. Security and high-stakes diplomacy. Let's see how the rest of the world reacts.
These ripples are dictating the highest levels of global diplomacy today, creating an absolute scramble behind closed doors. In the realm of private, quiet diplomacy, you've got Secretary of State Marco Rubio securing a rare audience at the Vatican with Pope Leo XIV to discuss the Middle East crisis. Meanwhile, in highly public superpower posturing, diplomats are frantically finalizing the preparations for a major summit in Beijing between President Trump and President Xi Jinping, where the Iran war and trade tariffs are topping the agenda. And bridging those gaps, President Trump is also hosting Brazil's Lula da Silva at the White House to talk regional stability and trade.
Now, as the diplomats scramble, the intelligence community is doing the math. A confidential CIA analysis has just concluded that Iran's economy can survive the current U.S. naval blockade for only 3 to 4 months before severe economic hardship really sets in. And we're talking crippling inflation, shortages of basic civilian goods, and internal unrest. This 3 to 4 month window, that's the invisible clock ticking behind every single negotiation and military strike we are seeing right now. Meanwhile, this conflict is sparking immediate domestic security fears far, far beyond the front lines. Just look at Europe. German officials are actively raising their national terror alert level today. They're explicitly citing an increased risk of Iranian-linked hybrid attacks. And just for clarity, a hybrid attack means combining conventional tactics with things like cyber warfare, infrastructure hacking, and disinformation campaigns. On top of that, they're warning of specific domestic plots against Israeli targets right there within Europe. The battlefield is literally no longer just geographical, it is ideological and it is asymmetrical.
Section 4. Health and Humanitarian Crises, Outbreaks and Insurgencies.
Beyond the Middle East, the world's emergency bandwidth is just snapping under the pressure of concurrent crises. The World Health Organization has just confirmed an outbreak of the Andes virus aboard the MV Hondias cruise ship. This is a severe type of hantavirus, usually transmitted by rodents, and it can have a very high fatality rate. There are already multiple cases and at least 3 deaths reported, which has triggered this massive international contact tracing effort across the UK, France, and Spain. At the exact same time, a tragic power vacuum in Africa has turned deadly. Al-Qaeda-linked insurgents attacked 2 villages in central Mali, killing approximately 50 people. This horrific attack followed closely on the heels of Russian-aligned troops withdrawing from that specific region. It just goes to show exactly how quickly instability fills a void.
Finally, Section 5. U.S. domestic flashpoints. Legal and political clashes happening right at home.
So completely independent of the international chaos, purely domestic ripples are hitting the administration today. Remember that upcoming summit in Beijing we mentioned a few minutes ago? Well, President Trump is heading into those high-stakes tariff talks right as the U.S. Court of International Trade hands down a major judicial check. In what's a highly significant legal setback for the administration's America First trade policy, the court ruled today that the Trump administration wrongly invoked trade laws to apply specific duties.
And simultaneously, a massive political fight is brewing over media control. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and senior Senate Democrats are aggressively clashing with the FCC right now. They're demanding the commission rescind a specific order that targets Disney's broadcast licenses. The Democrats are publicly accusing the FCC of political overreach, framing it as an inappropriate attempt to use regulatory power to go after a major media corporation's assets.
Ultimately, this explainer shows why all of this really matters to you. Our world is so incredibly connected that a missile strike today could literally change your grocery prices, your gas prices, and your geopolitical safety tomorrow. I mean, from a naval blockade to snack packaging ink in Japan, the ripples absolutely spare no one. When you look at the sheer volume of instability across the globe today, it leaves us all to wonder, where exactly will the next domino fall?